Welcome everyone, I'm Simon and I have the privilege of leading Kerith across all their sites, and it's wonderful to be with you today for our online gathering. Well, it's just over a week ago since my wife Katrina and I came back from 2 weeks holiday, and we travelled to Croatia by train. We had a great time. I won't bore you now with the itinerary or the details of what we did or the photos, but I've got one photo here of us at the start of the holidays. This is us at Bracknell railway station. We walked there from home with our rucksacks on, travelling up to London to get the Eurostar to Paris. And I want to remind us today that holidays are not just some luxury, they're part of the essential rhythm of doing life as God intended us. God intended us to live life with a rhythm. Those of you who've been around for a while will have heard me talk about this stuff before, but God designed a world that had a rhythm to the day. There was light and dark, there was beginning and end, there was eating and there was resting and there was working. The day had a rhythm to it, and there was a rhythm to the week with Sabbath and a 24-hour break in the week that God commanded for his people. And there was a rhythm to the year, not only the seasonal rhythm with the different seasons and different phases of the year, but also for Israel, the festivals that they had, these 7 times a year that they came together as people, that they stopped, that they celebrated, that they reflected on what was happening. And there was even within Israel a rhythm to the years. There was this sense of jubilee that every 7 years the land had a rest and the people had a rest. And so there was a rhythm to the day, a rhythm to the week, a rhythm to the year, and a rhythm to the years. And one of the benefits, I think, particularly around having a rhythm to the year, is that it gives us time to reflect and think about where our lives are going, to think about where we're at, and to think about where we might want to go and what differences, what changes we might want to make. I think that's hard to do in the hurly-burly of life, when we're just rushing through life and doing life, to find that space. But I think when we have holidays, when we have those longer extended breaks, that's an opportunity for us to ask those questions. I think that's often why in the whole Christmas New Year season we think about setting New Year's resolutions. We have that break between Christmas and New Year, and we've done all the presents and all that stuff, and we have a bit of time to think, hey, what's my life like, and what might I want to do differently in the new year that I might have a different life. Now, even if those resolutions don't go very far, there's a benefit to having those conversations. And for Katrina and I, our holiday away was a time to begin to ask some of those questions, and that's what I want to talk about today. Not the questions that we ask, but the questions that all of us might want to be asking of ourselves. So what do we talk about? Well, we talked about our aging parents and how we might look to care for them in the coming years. It's quite likely in the next year that all of our children will have left home. And we talked about whether at some point this year we want to move, and if so, where do we want to move? What sort of house do we want to move to? And perhaps most significantly for us, we talked about our roles in church and what God is calling us to. We talked about Katrina's role leading the site leaders and how much longer she would want to do that and feel like she wants to be in that position. And we talked about my role, realizing that this September I'll be 57, I'll be 10 years away from pension age, the age that I could begin to draw the state pension. And at some point in the next 10 years, I feel that I need to begin to hand over the leadership of Kerith, hand it on to the next generation who'll be equipped to reach their generation. I don't feel anxiety about that. We have an amazing team of leaders coming up and developing within us and already leading in very significant ways. But I want to make sure that I do that well and that I don't go too quickly or hang around too long. And that as a church, we have another successful succession. We had a successful succession from Ben Davis to me, and I'm planning for another successful succession as we hand on to the next generation. Just to be clear, we did also talk about the beautiful views and where we were going to have lunch and all those sorts of things as well. But we did make time to talk about some of these bigger questions. Now, interestingly, we did a very similar holiday in 1990 when we were 25. And we'd been married just over a year. Here's the equivalent picture of us in 1990 with our rucksacks. I think that's somewhere in Germany, as we just look improbably young there, don't they? I think I only look about 12, but we were married at that point. We were living in Reading, We were part of Kerith, which in those days was Bracknell Baptist Church here in Bracknell. In those days we only had one site. I was working for an electronics company in Henley. Katrina was a school teacher up in Paddington. And back then we were asking a very different set of questions to the ones that we're asking now, to the ones that we asked on the holiday that we've just been on. So we were asking questions like, who are we? And how are we supposed to do this thing together called marriage? What does this two becoming one look like? Are we going to have children? And if so, when is that going to happen? What do we want to achieve with our lives? They were the sort of questions that we were asking then. And I want to reflect today as we're thinking about this, that at different stages of life, we'll be asking very different questions. And that's right, that's appropriate. I'm reminded of a talk I heard by a guy called Gordon MacDonald, who came and preached at Kerith a number of times some years back. An American pastor who wrote a book called Ordering Your Private World, which was very famous. And he talked about the different questions that people ask in different seasons of life. Now, this is very general, and I don't want us to get too hung up on this, but he said generally, in their 20s, the question people are asking is, who am I? I think that's the question that Katrina and I were asking. Who am I? What's my life going to be about? What's my purpose in life? We were definitely wondering those things. I was chatting to some of our youngsters in Farnborough last Sunday when I was there, and there was two girls, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. They were talking about the pressure that they feel under to know what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, that people at school are asking them for A-levels and degrees, like, you need to know what your life's all about. You need to know what your career's going to be and what you're going to do. And they're feeling we're under so much pressure. And I think there's a lot of pressure on people in our society, for Gen Z and millennials, to know, like, who am I? And what's my identity? And to define that and to be able to project that. I think Gordon said that often people in their 30s are asking the question, how do I hold all this together? I certainly remember for us with 3 young kids as we were in our 30s, just thinking, like, how are we going to survive this? It was probably the tightest time financially for us as a couple. And I think for singles and for people who are married, whether they have kids or not, often the 30s are incredibly busy. I'm just trying to work out how do we hold all this together? How do we keep this going? Gordon says that in their 40s, people are asking the question, there must be something more than this. You know, I started in my 20s with all these dreams and all these hopes and all these aspirations and ideas of what life would look like, and it doesn't quite seem as shiny and as rosy and as exciting as I thought it might be. There must be something more than this. In their 50s, this is where I'm at, the question is, like, can I hold on? Or am I going to be replaced by this younger generation who seem like so much better equipped at everything and, so much more skilled and tooled up to do stuff? Can I hold on? People in their 60s, Gordon would say, are asking the question, am I redundant? Do I have any part to play? I recognise this can be a question in church life as we look at, all of generally our preachers and our teachers and our worship leaders are all younger folks, and those who are in their 60s can be asking the question, do I still have any part to play in this community? Do I still have a contribution to bring? And we can feel that in the world as well, as our world seems to be increasingly set up for younger people. And then in their 70s, Gordon would say, people are often asking, was it worth it all? What has my life been about? Was it meaningful? Did I achieve the things that I wanted to do? What was it all about? I wonder what questions you're asking. I wonder if you had long enough now to stop and go, where's my life at? What are the questions you're asking? The philosopher Socrates said this, the unexamined life is not worth living. I think that's a very helpful statement for us. There's real power in examining our lives and asking these questions. It stops us just being victims. The danger is that, life is going this way and life just continues to go this way because we just don't take any action. We can become victims with that sort of mentality. I don't have any agency. I don't have any control. Well, the reality is that we do have agency and control in our lives. And we can change things. We can change direction. We can, make changes in our lives. There's a bit in Haggai, who's a prophet in the Old Testament. And Haggai says this to the people. He's prophesying to the people. He says this, now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You've planted much but have harvested little. You eat but never have enough. You drink but never have your fill. You put on clothes but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. And I want to challenge you today. And you might even want to pause the online in a moment and go, hey, this would be a good moment to stop and think about this for a moment. Or maybe you go, well, I've got a holiday coming up, I've got a break coming up, I want to create time to think about this then. But I want to challenge you as, what are the questions that you're asking about your life? They might be some of those questions that I've posed in terms of the generations. They might be a completely different set of questions. But what are the questions that you're asking? What are the ways that God would say to you, consider your ways? So if you want to, why don't you pause now and have a think about that? And I will be back with you in a moment. Well, I want to encourage you to be asking those questions. And four things that I think God would have us do with those questions. The first of all is to acknowledge them. There's something incredibly healthy about going, this is the stuff that I'm wrestling with. To admit to yourself that this is the stuff that's going on inside you. These are maybe the dilemmas that you're wrestling with, the anxieties that you're living with, the questions that you're living with. This is what's going on. This is what I'm trying to deal with. Whatever that looks like, I think there's something powerful about us just beginning to be honest about that, as we want to be emotionally healthy people. This is for all of us to be asking those questions. Secondly, I think there's something powerful about processing them in community. For those of us who are married, that means talking about them first and foremost with our partner. That was what was great for me and Katrina being on holiday. We had a lot of time to talk about these sorts of things, about what we were thinking, what we were feeling, to maybe talk about something one day for maybe 20 minutes and then come back to it the next day, having both had a bit of more of a chance to think about it. For singles, I want to encourage you to have around you a group of friends that you're having these conversations with. And for married couples as well, to have trusted friends around you. This is one of the ways that we can take our relationships and our connections so much deeper, that we're not just talking about the superficial stuff. We're not just talking about the football result at the weekend or England doing well at the cricket or whatever it might be. No, we're really sharing our lives with one another. So I want to encourage us, first of all, to acknowledge our questions, to be aware of what are the questions that I'm asking about my life. Secondly, to process them in community. Thirdly, to process them with God. James 1:5-6 says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. And I think to bring these things to God. Luke 11 says, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For he who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. I think we often think of that in terms of asking, to God to answer prayers for like healing or provision or something like that. But we can ask God also to answer the questions that we've got. It's uniquely part of who we are, made in the image of God, that we have these questions. Our Labrador Salmon is not asking these sorts of questions. He is not asking these questions about his life or anything that's going on. He's just acting on instinct, but we aren't. And we're created in the image of a God who asks questions. And God is not afraid or worried about us coming to him with these questions that we have, because they're the things that can move us forward in life. So they're the first three things that I would say. Now, as I thought about handing on the church, I started to write a list of the things I would love to see happen before I finish. And please don't anyone panic about this. Today's talk is not about me like suddenly bailing out and going anywhere. It's going to be, a number of years before that happens. There's no like date set or anything. This is not Simon announcing his retirement or anything like that. But I just want to be honest with you. These are some of the things that I wrote down in terms of things that I would love to see happen. I'd love to hand on a church which is vibrant, full of faith, joyful and outward looking. I long to hand over a church that looks like, I think already our church looks like that. I long for more of that. I long for us to be impacting every community that we're related in and located in. I long for us to be seeing many people come to know Christ, our friends, our neighbours, our relatives. I long for us to be a place of worship, a place of healing, a place of restoration. I long to leave a church with a pipeline of emerging leaders, both in church and in society. I long to leave a church which is multi-generational and multi-ethnic, with diversity, including gender diversity at every level of leadership. I long for us to finish redeveloping the Farnborough and Windsor buildings, and for us to buy the warehouse in Windsor. I long to hand on a church which is debt-free and financially secure. I long to hand on a church which has a great oversight in terms of elders and trustees and external advisors. And I could keep going on of things that I've written on that list. And I must admit, I wrote that list one evening and I felt a bit overwhelmed when I got to the end of it. I was like, oh my goodness, it feels like there's an awful lot to achieve in the next few years. And how are we going to do all this stuff? And I went to sleep feeling a bit anxious, and I woke up with this phrase on my mind, and it was this phrase. It was a very simple phrase. It was simply this: stay close to Jesus. Actually, ultimately, the answer to the questions that I have is found in staying close to Jesus. And actually, the closer my relationship is with him, then the greater extent that the things I long for will come to pass. You'll have heard me many times before, those of you who've been around for a while. This is some of my favourite verses in John chapter 15, where Jesus said this: I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do remain in me, you're like a branch if you don't remain in me, you're like a branch that's thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. And I realize for me in this season of life, the ultimate question of how am I going to do this season well, of handing over well, of handing over to the next generation well, is by staying close to Jesus. That's ultimately the thing that's going to make that happen. And that's true for me, and that's true for you. Whatever your questions are, the answer is to be close to Jesus. So maybe you're in your 20s, maybe you're struggling like, who am I? Well, if you define who you are for yourself, that is a really tough thing to do, because then you have to act out being that person. But if you define yourself by who you are in Christ and who God says you are, then you are in a place of grace, a place of rest, a place where you go, well, I'm a child of the living God. That's my identity. That's who I am. That's what gives me security and confidence and peace. And I'm not defined by the thing that I do or the job that I have or the way that anybody else views me. I'm in Christ. Maybe you're in your 30s thinking, how do I hold all this together? Well, you do it by putting God first. And then God's promise is if you put him first, then he will help you order all the other things. He'll help you understand what's important and what's not important. He'll help you pull it all together. He will help you come through. Maybe you're in your 40s thinking there must be something more than this. Well, there is, because this life is not all there is to come. All there is, there's another life to come. This world is sinful and broken and messed up. This world will act against us. We have a devil, the enemy, who is against us and is opposing us. And it's okay not to achieve incredible things and be doing amazing things. The important thing is, are we seeking God? Are we working after him? Are we longing for more of his will and his heart in our lives? And if we're in that place, we can rest with what is happening in our worlds. Maybe in our 50s, like me, thinking, can I hold on? Well, the question is yes and no, because yes, God has stuff for me to do in this season, but no, God's plan for me is actually not to hold on. It's not to grab hold of what I've got and cling onto it for all my life, not let anyone take it from me. My role in this season is to be handing this stuff on. My success is not going to be the sermons that I preach, or the books that I write, or the thoughts that I have. It's going to be the people that I build and help to build and release and equip as the next generation. My success is going to be the group of people who follow me. They're the ones who are going to define whether what I have done has been successful or not. So can I hold on? I don't need to hold on. I need to actually begin to let go. In our 60s, am I redundant? Well, in Christ, there is no retirement. But I do think roles change as we get older. For me, my role will change when I no longer lead Kerith. And my role will be to cheer on the next generation, to pray for them, to support them, to stand with them, to equip them, to mentor them, to pastor them. All of us can play a part in doing that, who are in our 60s and our 70s. Was it all worth it? Well, the Apostle Paul says, for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. And God's promise is that he will take our messed up, weak, contributions, and he will build something beautiful out of the mess. God says in all things he works together for our good. Was it all worth it? Yeah, well, God will use it all. And because this life is not all there is, hey, there's a whole eternity to come with Christ, and we need to have an eternal perspective. So I want to encourage you, hey, let's acknowledge the questions that we have in life. Let's be real at those different ages and different stages. Let's be aware. You youngsters, be aware that the older folks are asking different questions to the ones that you're asking. Don't think we're all asking the same questions. And let's listen to one another's questions, being able to enter into one another's worlds. Let's do that in community. Let's deepen our friendships by being honest about the things that we're wrestling with, the things that we would wish were different, the things that we long to see God do in our lives. Let's bring those things to God in prayer. And let's wrap up all of that by staying as close as we can to Christ. Because ultimately, if we do that, then we will bear much fruit to his glory. Hey, so I hope that's been helpful. Really, this is one to take away with us, to think about. I know many of us will be taking time out over the summer. As in the midst of choosing what ice cream we're going to have, or when we're going to go to the beach or whatever it might be, let's take some time to think about some of these bigger questions in the rhythm that we find, and to ask ourselves, to ask one another, hey, what are these bigger things? And I believe as we do that, then God will begin to shape our lives, and we will be more the image of Jesus to the world that we live in. So yeah, gang, love you all. It's wonderful to be with you. Have a fabulous rest of your day, and I hope to catch you again soon.